Hello. The agenda that I've laid out for the 3-day offsite has a lot of moving parts, so I thought it would be easier to do a virtual walkthrough of the activities, so you can see how the ideas flow from one activity to the next. Think of this virtual room you're seeing as a virtual representation for how each day will progress. It's not necessary that the actual room be laid out in the same manner. We'll kick off on Tuesday morning at 8 o'clock with a little welcome and context setting by leadership. Then we'll talk through the agenda for the 3 days, introduce and talk through the role of the facilitators, and share the expected outcomes for the offsite. We'll go over the meeting principles which have been chosen to encourage participants to have good, healthy conversations. Then we'll do a team portrait, where we ask participants to share their name, their role in the organization, their expected outcomes for the 3 days, and then ask them to share one interesting thing about themselves to cap off introductions. Then we'll shift into an energizer and team building activity called Build a Bridge. The object here is to use paper and tape to build a 4-foot-long, 2-foot-tall bridge capable of supporting the weight of a rolling ball of paper. We'll break participants into groups and give them 10 minutes to plan, 8 minutes to build, and then we'll debrief for 10 minutes. The purpose of Build a Bridge is that it quickly recreates group dynamics, and it highlights the importance of relationships and process as well as driving for results. The 3-part model of results, relationships, and process will be a theme for the rest of the 3 days. We would graphic record, which is to say, take large visual notes of the debrief. Next, we'll do a personality assessment called the Team Dimensions Profile. Think of it as sort of a Myers-Briggs light. But unlike other personality assessments, this one places people against a model of how ideas become reality. There are creators, who are the ones who initially come up with the idea. There are advancers, who promote the idea and see the potential. There are the refiners, who check the idea against reality and see the risks. Then there are executors, who carry out the plan and deliver. We'll introduce the model, have participants complete the assessment, and share their results, if willing. We'll explore each of the styles and talk about the strengths and challenges that come from having different styles in a group. The purpose of sharing the Team Dimensions Profile is to provide an objective lens to diagnose challenges that show up in the relationships and processes. We would graphic record the key parts of the model and the highlights from the conversation. Next, we'll take a 15-minute break and then start off on the content of the offsite. We'll do a quick overview and discussion of the 4 themes: business analytics, analytic transformation, knowledge management, and communication. This may be the place where we ask the folks responsible for business analytics to do a quick overview of their function and, in addition to participating in the activities over the next 3 days, to be listening with an ear towards how the actions and decisions we come up with could translate into metrics for them. We would graphic record this discussion. Next, we'll do a quick customer segmentation activity. The organizing framework here isn't that important. This could be as simple as a brainstormed list of our key customers and stakeholders. What we would expect the group to generate is leadership, employees, and direct customers. If there is an organization that shows up over the course of harvesting the groups, which is to say Group A is a subset of Group B, we'll capture that. What's most important here is the list of customers. Next, we'll do a dot vote to choose the customers we believe are most important to exploring for the remainder of the offsite. A dot vote is a method where you take the number of options, divide by 3, and then give that number of sticky dots to the participants to place on each option. For example, if there are 6 options, each participant would get 2 dots to place. They can distribute their dots however they like, spreading them evenly or weighing one option more heavily than another. How we define most important may be worth some discussion, but defining importance tends to vary by individual, so we'll simply capture ideas and not try to come up with a perfect definition. We will point out that just because a customer group isn't at the top of the list doesn't mean we'll stop serving them. Again, the purpose of the dot vote is to gauge which customer groups are most important to explore and better understand during the offsite. We'll break for a 45-minute lunch at 11:30. After lunch, we'll do a quick regroup and process check. we'll take the top customer groups and develop persona profiles. Persona profiles come from human-centered design and design thinking. They put a name and a face on stakeholder groups. They are fictionalized characterizations to help participants empathize and understand the stakeholder groups. The format I like to use is like a dossier. It has a name, the customer group they belong to, likes, dislikes, career goals, frustrations, feelings towards your organization, the needs that your organization can help provide for, preferred communications channels, and a memorable quote. The way I'd like participants to develop the persona profiles is called open space. Each top stakeholder group would get its own persona profile. From there, participants would be free to work on the persona or personas that they have the most energy around. We wouldn't dictate who has to develop which profile. And if someone wants to leave a persona midway and join development of another, that's okay. The principles of open space say, whoever shows up are the right people, whatever conversations had are the right ones to have, and whenever a conversation starts and ends is the right time for it to start and end. And there's one law, the law of 2 feet. That means if a conversation isn't working for you, you can leave it and join another. We'd give participants about an hour to develop the persona profiles. Then we'd invite participants to share the persona profiles that they'd developed back to the large group. We would graphic record highlights from that debrief. Next, we'd take a 15-minute break. Then we would begin to design customer journey maps. A journey map is a string of touch points a customer has with a product or service. The best way to get comfortable using journey maps is to break into groups of 3 or 4 and have participants map out an experience that they've all had, like air travel. While they map the experience, they look for 3 things: loves, pains, and opportunities. Which touch points does the customer appreciate or experience gain from? Which cause frustration? Which have an opportunity behind them, either to magnify a success or fix a problem? As the groups work on the journey maps, they need to watch out for behind-the-curtain activities. These are the things that may be important to the organization, but are invisible to the customer. For example, when they scan my ticket at the gate, I don't see the field in the database that updates, or the manifest with my name on it, or the purchasing system that bought the scanner, or the training program that taught the person at the counter how to scan the ticket. All I see is my ticket and the scanner. Anything that's behind the curtain goes below the line on the journey map. Participants capture it if necessary and move on. A journey map is about the customer's experience, not what it takes to get there. Once the groups have had the chance to get comfortable using journey maps, we would have them in groups create journey maps on behalf of the persona profiles against the experience of working with your organization. The experience would be most common interactions that a persona has with your organization. There are a few decision points here. We need to decide whether participants will work on just one journey map or have the opportunity to weigh in on several. We need to decide if we're going to assign participants to work on specific journey maps and whether that assignment will favor intact teams that work together or cross-functional teams. If we're going to give participants the opportunity to work on several journey maps, there's 3 ways we could do that. We could again use open space. We could use another method called a World Cafe, where groups rotate from one journey map to the next. What I wouldn't do here is have the entire group work on one journey map at once. Working in the large plenary increases the risks of production blocking, social loafing, and evaluation apprehension. It all depends on the dynamics and insights you'd like to foster among the participants. We should be thoughtful about this decision. We'll give participants the rest of the day to complete their journey maps. We'll graphic record the debrief. At this point, the energy in the room will be waning. So the debriefs will be simple report outs. There will be an opportunity to react and refine the next day. We'll assign homework, which is the reading of the 5 whys from the book The Lean Startup. And we'll close the day at 4:30 with 1-word checkouts. 1 word to describe the mood with which you are leaving. It's quick, it allows people to empty their backpacks a little, and it serves as a good pulse check for us on the mood of the group. Day 2 will begin at 8 a.m. We'll start with a leadership welcome and a quick overview of the agenda. We'll do morning percolations, which is a time-boxed, open discussion for participants to reflect on the previous day and share whatever occurred to them overnight. It gives participants a chance to empty their backpacks and be fully present and engaged for the day. We'll graphic record morning percolations. We'll do an energizer called Telestrations. Participants write a word at random in a notebook and then pass the notebook to the left. The next participant has to draw the word on the next page. Then they pass the notebook again, and the next participant has to figure out what the drawing is and write it down on the next page, and then pass it on again. This repeats until the notebook comes back to the original participant. Telestrations is a good energizer because it models a round-robin activity that we'll do later in the day. It also encourages constructive thinking, which is building on another person's ideas. And it can serve as a model for what can happen in communication, which we'll look at in Day 3. After Telestrations, we'll give participants the opportunity to go back to their journey maps and make any changes based on what they heard during the debriefs the day before. We'll also ask participants to make note of any conflict from one journey map to another, where one persona's love is another persona's pain. We'll harvest the list of conflicts onto a flip chart and then dot vote to choose the top 12 conflicts. We'll take a 15-minute break and then introduce abstraction laddering by asking participants to share their insights from the night's reading on the 5 whys. We'll talk through the use of the abstraction ladder template, which uses the 5 whys to establish root cause. It also uses 5 hows, which explores one possible approach to resolving the conflict. I'd like to again use open space for this activity to allow participants to work on the conflicts they have the most energy around. Before lunch, we'll report out and graphic record the 12 abstraction ladders. We'll break for lunch at 11:45 and return at 12:30. After lunch, we'll use a round robin to explore unconventional ways to resolving the conflicts. Each conflict is listed at the top of a form. The form has 3 columns: an unconventional solution, why it will fail, and resolve the conflict. Participants sit in a circle and have 30 seconds to fill out the next empty cell before passing it on to the next participant. At this tempo, it takes a minute and a half to come up with a solution, a criticism, and a resolution for a conflict. In 15 minutes, we'll have 8 completed rows. The round robin will draw on the skills picked up from Telestrations and the personality dynamics of the Team Dimensions profile. It suggests non-obvious alternative solutions, which can be a weakness of abstraction laddering. We'll debrief the process and some of the content of the round-robin forms. Then we'll post the abstraction ladder templates and the round-robin forms to a large sheet of paper on the wall. We'll pass out these game plan templates and give participants time to do a gallery walk against all the content on the wall and translate it into actions, writing them down in the cloud on the left side of the template. Identifying an action doesn't necessarily mean it's yours to do. After the gallery walk, we'll harvest all the actions up to a large wall chart, eliminating duplicates and encouraging participants to list any actions they didn't think of themselves but have a personal interest in. Then we'll set the action game plans aside for the time being. We'll take a 15-minute break. After the break, we'll have all the participants break into groups of 3 to 4 to design a 2B journey map from an analyst's perspective. It's probably not necessary that these be done as large wall charts. We'll design 11 by 17 tabletop versions of the journey map template so that the work can be done at a smaller scale. Again, we need to decide the best way to assign participants, but it's important that at least one participant have a solid working knowledge of the analytic transformation initiatives. We debrief each new journey map and graphic record the highlights. Then we'd give participants time to add any new actions to their game plan clouds. They should be thinking in particular about what it takes to go from the as-is captured from the previous day's journey maps to the 2B journey maps they just designed. We'd quickly harvest new actions to the large game plan chart for everyone's benefit. If there's time available, we can give participants time to start populating the right side of the game plan, which translates the actions into plans, tasks, and schedules to make them a reality. There will be time on the third day to finish populating the game plans. We'll assign homework, which is to bring any known hard dates that will impact operations for the coming year. We'll close the day at 4:30 with one-word checkouts. Day 3 begins at 8 a.m. with a welcome, overview of the day's agenda, and morning percolations. The energizer is Disruptus, which has participants brainstorm around how they might combine two random objects to serve a purpose. It fosters creative, innovative thinking and a solutions-driven mindset. Participants will have a chance to complete their game plans, refining the content around the room into actions. Then they'll share their actions to the large group, which will also be recorded on the large version of the game plan to identify any overlaps or opportunities for collaboration. We'll take a 15-minute break and then change gears to talk about communication. We'll use a large visual template to organize what's working, what's not, and what solutions could either fix what's not working or maximize what is working. Then, groups of 3 to 4 will build out a simple communications plan for each of the personas. The communications plan will answer who, what, how, when, and why. Who is the stakeholder group? What messages do they need to hear from us? How would they like to receive that message? When and how often the messaging will take place? And what the ultimate purpose of the meeting is. Groups will debrief their communications plans and point out any new actions, which we'll record on the large game plan. Lunch will be from noon to 12:45. After lunch, we'll populate a roadmap for the coming year, beginning with the hard dates that participants gathered for homework, and then filling it in with actions from the game plan that also have fixed dates or deadlines. We can prioritize actions that don't have specific deadlines using an impact implementation chart, which places actions based on their relative impact and how hard they are to implement. It'll be necessary to spend a little bit of time defining criteria for both axes. Impact usually has criteria like value to customer, number of customers, and importance of customer served. Implementation usually includes resources, time, cost, level of effort, and complexity. One of the outcomes of doing an impact implementation chart is that it can have a life beyond the offsite as a basis for a decision model. Once actions are laid out on the roadmap and the impact implementation chart, we'll ask for volunteers to be the lead for each action, except of course the actions that are difficult and will have low impact. Being the lead doesn't necessarily mean that you're the one tasked to implement it, but it does mean you're responsible for seeing that it's carried out and for reporting back to the organization on its progress. If there are scheduled or high-impact actions without volunteers, leadership will have to decide whether or not to assign leads. Some time will be held at the end of the day in case we get behind on schedule. If not, we can either end early or do an additional activity. In any case, we'll want to pause after the first and second day to see how the approach is working and make changes to it if necessary. We'll close the offsite at 4:30 with some reflections from leadership and with a quick appreciative activity called Learn, Do, Thank. In one breath, one thing you learned, one thing you'll do differently, and one thing you'd like to thank the group for.